for coming here. Everybody in the audience was very impressive from your speech. For us who weren't here, for people who weren't here, who is Ketan Makwana in 3 sentences?
Wow, in 3 sentences. Well, Ketan Makwana is perhaps a serial entrepreneur, an investor mentor, and an all-round disruptor.
First time in Albania?
Yes, it is my first time in Albania. As I say, I arrived 24 hours ago. It's an amazing place, Tirane. I mean, there's so, as I was saying in my talk, so much energy, enthusiasm, motivation, and even inspiration. It kind of gives me this feeling that it's time that I did something disruptive here.
What do you know about Albania? Because I saw that there were some slides in your presentation talking about some topics.
I mean, my information is very, very restricted to the digital information that I could get of Albania. But you know, statistically, 58th ease of country to work with, 46th ranking by World Bank on starting businesses. Tirane obviously is the main kind of city for Albania. I had some of your traditional dish yesterday, the pastry with the spinach inside. That was fantastic. But I've kept my knowledge very, very light on purpose, because it's not, I don't want a book or a piece of paper to tell me what Albania is about. It's for me to come in and discover what Albania really is for me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
The InfoCom event today is called The Leading Path to Innovation. Let me be straight, how do you define innovation?
Well, innovation can carry so many different connotations or meanings. Very much, I think the core of it is doing things differently to evoke a different result. Or sometimes it's changing the way in which you approach something to evoke change in that respect. It's not just about what you create, it's the mindset that you develop. So innovation kind of is something that our ecosystems and our lives cannot live without, because in every cycle of evolution there's a revolution, and these two things come through innovation.
Yes, because when we are talking about innovation now, everybody is thinking mobile apps, mobile smartphones, but in the meantime, maybe 50 years ago, there was another innovation.
It's actually interesting you say that, because like you're absolutely right. A lot of people look at innovation and immediately drive towards or magnetize towards tech.
Robots
and robots and AI and stuff like this. At Enterprise Lab and a lot of the work we do, we have three main core pillars, which is ideation, innovation, and leadership. But innovation's also about people. It's all about how you innovate their mind, how you innovate their behaviors, how you innovate the way in which they lead. So innovation doesn't just have to draw on technology. I think if we can use design thinking and the processes that we do in technology in evolving ourselves, we stand to have a better chance.
In your presentation, the title was about entrepreneurial ecosystems. How are they developed and why are they important?
Well, I think any economy cannot survive without an entrepreneurial ecosystem. It's the lifeblood of emerging economies and markets. So we're talking about the culture of starting up businesses, which will initially be micros, which move on to become small to medium, which could come on to large economies. It also stimulates employability in the sense that, and the disposable income side, you see. So to give you an example of this, it's a kind of saying to people, if you can't find a job, create one in that respect. A bit like what I did when I lost my job, I just created myself a job in that respect. And I think, you know, in my opinion, the word entrepreneurship has been over-exaggerated or overpopulated in the last 5 or 6 years. We're now seeing entrepreneurship and its main drivers and triggers being better understood now in different economies. The situation that we have is that now people are thinking innovation and disruption, and I just hope sincerely, I'm going to continue moving around the world as much as I can to explain what these two core things are. But it's important that every ecosystem has entrepreneurial behaviors and traits, because without that, you're not going to be able to lead to the next innovation, the next the next growth in your economy.
So there's another role of the innovation in developing these ecosystems. How can we precisely involve innovation in this development of ecosystems?
It's interesting because rather than trying to fix innovation in one track or one channel to say this is the role it plays and this is the responsibility, I think innovation needs to be more of a fluid concept. As we said earlier in this interview, people channel or think of innovation as technology straight away, whereas it's not. You know, it could be used in so many different ways. How do you innovate the education system? How do you innovate the healthcare system? The healthcare doesn't just require the medical innovations, but also the pathway and the infrastructures and the way that patients get access to health in that respect, or the way in which they are delivered through the health system. All of these things allow people to allow for innovation or accept innovation. So it's got to be a very fluid concept in each ecosystem.
So identifying problems and finding new ways to
yes.
achieve results
yes.
or solutions.
But in that place, in that place, it's important to understand that people need to understand the problem, not just produce a solution and then attach it to a problem. Problem diagnostics is one of the most important parts of the design thinking and innovation process.
Okay, you have a worldwide experience in business development. Here in Albania, business is a concept that has 20 or to 25 years. And mostly in these 4 or 5 years, lately, we are introduced to the concept of startups, new businesses. Let's say small ecosystems are trying to evolve. New startups are entering, they are knowing the way how to work with a product or with a solution for a problem. What do you think about this startups thing? Are they the future? What is their impact in the future?
So, one of the first things I want to say is congratulations to Albania. You know, you're doing what a lot of countries aren't doing, and that's actually taking some form of action. Whilst you may still be at the early stages of the whole startup culture, you're cultivating a future economy. You've got drivers in there. Some of these startups that you're now cultivating at this moment in time, in the next 5 years, could become your, emerging SMEs or a large organization, recruiting thousands of people. That's part of that process. So any action will produce an impact. It's the legacy of that impact that's really, really important. I think what's also a priority for the country is as it moves into a more mature experience of the startup culture. So after 5 years of really cultivating startups, you really need to put your focus into growth and scalability, because what will happen is you'll become a mass population of startups, that a small economy of established businesses. So it's about having, in time, creating the balance between how much you're starting up and how much you're cultivating and growing.
And what we see is that, yes, we are cultivating and we are not seeing yet a success story or a big result.
That's fine. Look, I'll give you a very quick example about this. Growth in the early stages and results are very invisible. I'll give you a very, very quick example of this, that if I gave you a seed and a pot and some soil, and I asked you to create a plant, you sow the seed into the pot, correct?
Yeah.
Now, what do? You give it water. You keep watering it, but you can't see what the seed is doing, can you? You can't see the seed. You don't know if it's upside down, if it's left or right. All you know is if I keep nurturing it, eventually it's going to grow. Eventually, you receive a shoot. A green shoot pops up from the soil, okay? Yeah. This is when the dynamics change. To grow a plant, you need water and light. So you move it towards the light. You keep watering it and you apply light. Eventually that plant will grow. That plant will almost outgrow the pot. Then you have a choice. You either put it into a bigger pot, which is what we call growth, or you cut it and you sow it into your garden, and that's what we call scalability. So what I want to say to you is the country needs to be patient to a certain extent, but it needs to continue taking action. It needs to keep nurturing, it needs to keep, and what you will find is when the time is right, when the opportunity presents itself, those green shoots will start showing. And it's at that point we need to change the dynamic of what we're doing with these companies. As I say, startup cultivating is great, but at some point you need to cultivate growth or scalability. It's when you change that dynamic, you'll start to see rapid results.
That's great. What might be the connection between innovation and startups? Are they, I mean the startups, the new drivers of innovation, or is the progress of technology and innovative ideas that is stimulating the growth of startups?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. I think startups will always look at things from a different perspective. If it's a case of you can't or it's impossible to I can and I'm possible. But this is, innovation doesn't really come through without certain tools that will help drive innovation. Now, in this case, technology is one of those tools and drivers for innovation. People think of apps, they think of all the different types of technology, robotics, as we said, AI and stuff like this. But so the technology is the driver, and that's kind of it's almost motivating or instilling startup culture. But what the startups need to look at is what problems they're solving and what problems they're creating. Because a startup doesn't just solve a problem,
they also create
problems as well. And I think the more we start to look at that side of it and cultivating that behavior, you'll see that innovation and startup as a thing together needs to happen. But in between innovation and startups is another S, and that's called strategy. And it's all well and good saying, yes, I'm going to do something in tech, or yes, I'm going to be something innovative. Without a plan, without a strategy, without a prototype, things won't move forward.
Coming back to the ecosystems, in order to nurture the plants and to water them, in an ecosystem, who are the major roles? Who is mostly to influence this growth? I mean, only the startups, or are there other actors in this scheme?
Yes.
That induce or promote the growth?
There should be multiple actors at every level. The startup community is responsible wholly for building and generating the local economy. Okay, SMEs need to focus on their strategy, their growth, and their scalability to help on the whole job creation part of the market in terms of where the mid-economy sits. From a corporate and government level, it's more about the national framework of the economy and understanding everyone has a role to play. There isn't, institution, industry, sector.
Universities, education.
Absolutely. Everything has a role to play within this. So this is why you're seeing more and more corporations investing into having their own hubs and accelerators. This is why you see universities now creating their own hubs and accelerators and incubators. This is why you see in external groups creating their own incubators, because what happens is it's not I belong to this and you belong to that. It's an ecosystem where engagement may work through all the different levels, but it will take the startup community and it will take the SME community to drive this forward more before the corporate and government will really understand what their role is to play. And if I may add, government's role is really to support the initiatives and step back and let the private drive those initiatives.
That's a nice approach. And the outcomes of the ecosystem that we are about to see in the next years, what are the chances that they will influence the economy of our country, let's say in Balkans, Albania?
So,
do we have any examples?
So, there are certain elements. The brilliant thing about where you guys are currently in your position and with the economy is you may be behind certain economies in terms of trends. So, we heard today the Minister of Innovation and Public Administration talking about fiber optic for internet and broadband, and in some countries or more developed economies we're already ahead with fiber optic. This puts you in a very, very competitive position, because this offers you the opportunity of hindsight. One of the things that was said today is the complications and costs of digging up the roads to put lines in. In the UK, we have that mistake. We dig the same ground over and over and over again to put different things in. So the lessons to be learned here is that by watching what other economies are doing, understanding their mistakes, and actually saying we've got a better way of doing it, meets to the question that I was saying in my talk earlier today, which is Albania doesn't have to be a competitor or a player in a European market. It can change the way in which it innovates and builds its country and its economy for others to follow. So you've got a lot of what we call external experiences here, which enable you to see the mistakes and actually innovate further. So technology is obviously going to be a driver. I think health is going to be another amazing one. Data, big data, all of these kind of environments are going to be great, great drivers and keys. But the one thing that I can not stress enough for Albania is don't focus on the sector, focus on the people. Develop the talent. Keep nurturing the talent here, and anything is possible.
And how can we nurture the talent? What are the main pushes we have to do in the education system or where?
Bring Disruptor Academy in, let Enterprise Lab come in and help disrupt the country. But yes, we've got to create better bridges between, education and institution have a role to play. Industry and institutions have a role to play.
Because we have a young population and very enthusiastic so. And very...
But with enthusiasm comes overconfidence, comes under commitment, comes underestimation or overestimation. And as I was saying, failure is not a word that I have in my vocabulary, but it is the gap between expectation and delivery. So we've got to define roles and make sure that every stakeholder in this process understands what they're contributing and how they're adding value to the whole process. That's one of the most important elements here, because everyone has a role to play. This is not just the responsibility of this group or that group. The whole ecosystem needs everyone to play or play a part.
And I would stress more the education system.
Yes, okay, I understand the education system, but education is only driven, especially institutions, universities are only driven by what industry indicators represent. So, the common argument that I see in economies all over the world with, universities and institutions all over the world is industry are not telling us what they want.
So it's a problem of the industries.
And industry are saying that education isn't providing the right people. So
there's a gap.
There's always been a gap because no one's ready to take ownership. So this is why facilitators like us come in. We mediate between the two. We help industry consultant understand their challenges so they know what type of person and talent they need. Then we inject that challenge into the institution. So the education side of things start to understand what they've got to develop in the individual when they're leaving their academic career. So it's not the fault of anyone, it's the fault of both. And no point pointing fingers. It's better to do something about it. So identify industry indicators, engage the education to build to those indicators, and you'll be able to see that there's a much more harmonious approach.
Do you have any plan for Albania with your academy? Or at least for the Balkan region?
Watch this space, that's all I would say. It's going to be an interesting year. That's all I'm going to say right now.
We are all ears. And let's say another last sentence. We are reading stories about what's happening in Silicon Valley, in London, maybe in Dublin, and some things we see seems very apart from us. Let's say we hear about the driverless cars, electric cars, AI, robotics. Let's say in Silicon Valley or in other countries where innovation is happening really in a strong way. We see many things, but we feel divided here in Albania or in Balkans because these changes are not happening here. We see them very far. So it leads to a question, you have to be somewhere to innovate, or can innovation be born in countries like under development, like Albania, or